Hello, everyone. It's George from Ireland. So, thank you for coming back to my channel. I'm commenting on the 60th quadrennial presidential election in the United States, which we all know that Donald J. Trump has won. Of course, the electors won't meet till next month. They are various activists from states who are nominated as electors, and they elect according to the order of the state, not personal preference. You might wish to vote for Kamala Harris, but if your state said no, you're voting for Trump, you've got to vote for Trump. And in some states, a faithless elector can go to prison for going against that. So the result for the Democrats was far, far worse than anybody forecast because they suffered a triple defeat. Obviously, losing the Electoral College, losing most of the states. I think it's 28 states they've lost, and the two yet to come in. Losing the popular vote for the first time in 20 years. It was a lose, lose, lose. And they thought that their violent hatred of children would be a winning strategy. I'm very glad to say that that vicious, absolutely sickening demagoguery didn't work. They got more women to vote for them than the voted for the Republicans, but it wasn't such a big advantage amongst females as to carry them over the line. Now, the scale of the defeat shouldn't be exaggerated. They only lost the popular vote by, I think it's 3.2%, so they could easily win that back. Look to 1988, George Bush Sr. He trounced Michael Dukakis. George Bush Sr. won by 8 percentage points. But 4 years later, Bill Clinton, a Democrat, beat George Bush Sr. by 9 percentage points. So in a sense, it went sort of 17% towards the Democrats or away from the Republicans, whichever way you wish to see it. So the Democrats could easily recover. We mustn't overstate how bad this is, but they've lost the Senate, and very likely they will lose in the House of Representatives as well as some gubernatorial elections. So Donald J. Trump, he beat President Harris by 7 million votes, a similar figure to that which Joe Biden defeated Trump by 4 years ago. Let me see. Yeah, the opinion polls, they underrated Trump in 2016 and in 2020. They strove to correct this, but they still didn't manage it. He performed up to 5 percentage points better than the polar polls suggested. Of course, pollsters can only report what people tell them, and because of the low social trust of Trumpsters, they tend not to speak to pollsters, dislike the mainstream liberal media as they see them. Anyway, so some Republican held states were drifting into the toss up column 8 years ago, even 4 years ago, like Texas or Florida, but they're now safer than Republicans. And those are big states. Texas is the third most populous state, Florida, the fourth most populous state. Of course, Donald J is registered in Mar a Lago, Florida. So President Trump, as he's becoming again, did very well in the swing states. His campaign was laser focused on those, and these seven are determined of the outcome. He may well even win all seven, and the margins weren't even that slim. So what's going to happen? Well, he's going to force Ukraine to capitulate to Russia, not to give up all its territory. Russia already illegally occupies about 20% of Ukrainian soil. If Russia, is going to advance further, it'll be very easy if the United States is cutting off arms. So about half of Ukraine's armaments funding comes from the United States, and Donald J. Trump say, cut a deal or it's quits. Offer a deal to Putin. Putin, if he's canny, and I think he will say yes, then the war will calm down, the world will lose interest. Putin will continue grey zone warfare, wait till the moment is propitious, the world is distracted, and begin a full-scale invasion and finish it off, which might not be this year, might be in several years. We shall see. Yeah, so yes, I do like Olukemi Badenoch. I would love her carnally given half a chance. Um, so that's going to be one of the major consequences. So it'll be time for terrible anxiety there. So what else? So Trump four square backing for the Gazan genocide. That'll continue. The only good thing about him, he's going to save children in the USA from being murdered by feminists. Not enough. It's mostly a state issue, but more Supreme Court justices who recognize that the United States Constitution confers a right to life and does not confer a right to murder, and that's not a private matter. It's very much a public matter. So anti-environmentalism, that'll be his policy. He'll sort of rip up all those regulations, drill, drill, drill. That'll make energy cheaper, but it'll speed up global warming. He'll stop anti-white racism, but he still pumps out racial hatred against other groups. He's going to prevent transvestites going into all-female spaces to molest women and children. So Donald J said he'll deport millions of illegal immigrants. And now he's light on detail. Probably deport some, but he's broken many of his promises or simply failed to deliver, even if he made them sincerely. But the trade war against China, that wasn't successful last time. But the Chinese might be worried they might cave in. Their economy is already slowing. They've got rising unemployment. They spent so much on higher education for young people the last generation, and the other underemployed are unemployed. So the Chinese might make major concessions not to do that. If he does raise these tariffs on Chinese manufacturers, that'll hurt the Chinese economy. Of course, it's the American consumer pays it, not the Chinese manufacturer, but American consumers will not pay those much higher prices. That's what Trump is reasoning. They'll purchase American made goods, but that'll raise the cost of living again, as the working class and the middle class feel the cost of living has been squeezed for decades, and it'll have the wrong effect. And by deporting illegal immigrants, that'll mean to labor shortages, I suppose wage rises, but also sometimes they just can't find people to work at whatever for low enough wage, or anybody to work for any wage, and the wage is all right. Certain hospital places, it'll cause more bottlenecks in the US economy. Um, right, which might consider it still worth doing. So the orange orangutan is back. He's going to appoint his acolytes to the civil service. He wants to end impartiality in the civil service. It'll no longer be a career. It'll just be to be stuffed with his placemen. So he's vowed to instrumentalize the Department of Justice to persecute his critics. He even promised to use the United States military to oppress and presumably eliminate his opponents. So he's the most mendacious man of all time. But when he vows vengeance, he keeps his word. Well, how did he do it? Because 4 years ago, most people spoke about the era of Trump being at an end, and even I thought it was. So, and most Republican politicians said he's a vote loser. We need to turn the page. But they didn't move on. They tried to, they really did. There was much talk about Ron DeSantis as the new standard bearer. DeSantis was the governor of Florida, still is the governor of Florida, comfortably re-elected in a state which was purple. So he was young, intelligent, had a military career, appealed to many of the same people as DJT, but wasn't so crass and had a clean private life. But in the end, DeSantis failed to connect, and the party moved back to Donald J. So Donald J. Trump just stuck with his well-worn strategy of the big lie theory, of just pumping out flagrantly false statements, disseminating conspiracy theories. The bigger the lie, the more people believe it. The lies are repeated ad infinitum, and the cognitively subnormal fell for it. University of Zurich study proved the USA has more gullibility than other economically developed nations. So Trump appeals to churchgoers in particular, and religious people are inclined to believe falsehoods, despite probative evidence to the contrary, is the old Semmelweis reflex. When this bogus belief is disconfirmed, nevertheless they double down. Okay, because they're emotionally invested in it. It's part of their identity. There are a lot of idiots and a lot of evil people in every country. Now, Trump managed to exploit worries about legal and illegal immigration. So he played on that very skillfully, and that was a winning strategy for him. He blamed America's economic woes on the needy. Yeah, that's right. He says the poor have far too much money. So yeah, he disseminated these baseless lies about people being reduced to eating pets or illegal immigrants stealing people's pets and eating them, and this is absolute nonsense. How does he get away with these lies? Republicans were able to use the dead cat strategy, which is, I think, Steve Hilton, the Australian political guru, came up with this one. You bring up an issue which unites your party, but that divides the other one, and the other party don't want to talk about it, but they have to talk about it. You can't ignore a dead cat on the desk. This was Palestine. The Republicans are viciously anti-Palestinian, and they applaud the slaughter of civilians there. But the Democrats are among the Democrats, there's some who are just as genocidal. But there are Democrats who recognize Palestinians as human and insist that Israel abide by humanitarian law. The Democrats made some effort to persuade Israel not to murder quite so many Palestinians, but Biden repeatedly was slapped in the face by Israel when he could they please not be quite so merciless. Anyway, so some Democrats were so revolted by Biden's craven submission to Israel that they said they're not voting for him or even voting for Trump. I know Trump's going to be even worse, but they said the Democrats mustn't take us for granted, the pro-Palestinian elements, and the Democratic Party must be punished for what it's done, so that they'll have to earn our votes back by actually standing up for human rights. Remember, many people feared an indecisive result. with the candidate only winning by a handful of electoral votes or just a few thousand the popular vote. Trump would claim victory even if he lost. There'd be weeks of court battles. There might be literal battles. Trumpsters have convinced themselves the man was bound to win. He said a 97% chance. And he said there was proof positive of massive scale cheating by Democrats, and on and on. So there he is, the most unworthy president of all time, a convicted criminal, convicted of 34 felony counts, a man who was proven in a court of law to have committed a sexual assault on a woman. Wow. Wow. You think that no party would have him a candidate, even for the lowliest office, and yet he's the most powerful man in the world. This is the topsy-turvy world we live in. So he is incurious, ignorant, arrogant, idle, just vile. He is craven, cowardly, stratospherically vain, and he suffers from a host of psychological disorders, personality flaws, and Alzheimer's. So it's self-aggrandizement is what drives him. He's conscienceless. He's narcissistic, cruel, and a blowhard. It's very, very easy to manipulate him through flattery. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is at play. He says he's a very stable genius because he's an ignoramus. Anyway, and he's in charge for 4 years. So anyway, but the thing is, he'll be 78 and some months when he's inaugurated, the oldest president ever. Life expectancy for an American male is 76. He's beyond that. Bear in mind, he's morbidly obese with a body mass index of 35. He's had coronavirus. He can't walk more than 100 meters. He uses golf courts for longer distances. He only eats ultra processed junk food. He's an extremely stressful few years behind him and ahead of him. So it's staggering he's still alive. The chance to die in the next 12 months is 13%, and that percentage increases each passing year. The chance to die by the end of the next term is 60%, if not incapacitated by a stroke or a heart attack. So JD Vance will take over. So, but what does it say about the American people that knowing he's a convicted criminal, knowing he's a sex criminal, that they still voted for him? Wow. And not that many American presidents in recent decades have got a majority. They've only got a plurality of the popular vote. So it shows that many people are very, very stupid, but many people are also absolutely sick. It just proves how idiotic and irrational most people are. I mean, not just in the USA, but you have people just as bad in other countries. So, anyway, despite proof positive of his dishonesty being off the charts, they still went for him. Despite him failing to deliver on so many of his promises, they went for him. It is mind blowing that people are attracted to this impossibilism and racist rants. Well, what about the Democrats post mortem? They need to take a long, hard look at themselves. Their defeat is comprehensive. Yeah, so it's last time, when George Bush got a majority for the Republicans, a majority of the popular vote, he had incumbency, a growing economy, and a still popular war. He was physically fit. He was against a candidate who was older than him. And how did the Democrats manage to lose when they had incumbency, peace at home, a growing economy, a candidate who was younger than the opponent, who was healthy against an unhealthy one, and this should have been the Democrats for the taking. They had the sitting vice president as their candidate. The demographics were moving their way, and all the rest of it, because they're more popular amongst non-whites. Non-whites are growing as a percentage of the population. College-educated people are increasing as a percentage of the population. Two groups which break heavily towards the Democrats. The secularization of the USA also favors them. Those who don't worship on a weekly basis are more likely to vote Democrat. So Joe Biden's mental declension was something to do with it. If he made a declaration after the midterms, he wouldn't seek a second term. They'd have ample time to choose the best candidate, not necessarily Kamala. They used to say we couldn't choose Kamala because her approval ratings were even lower than his, but they went with her, the obvious choice, turned out to be the wrong choice. They calculated they stood a better chance of defeating Trump if Biden stood than anybody else for a while. Outside the Camarilla, few were cognizant of just how severely Biden's faculties had disimproved. But what did Kamala Harris know? When did she know it? She went out and lied for him repeatedly, assuring people that President Biden was as clear as a bell, when she knew that that definitely wasn't the case, and eventually couldn't even be hidden, and they had to ditch him as their candidate. So there's high inflation of the Democrats at the beginning. Okay, a lot to do with coronavirus, Ukraine war, and the Trump presidency. But it's down to a normal level now. But a lot of people did not forgive the Democrats for that. Of course, the government has only limited influence over inflation. But generally speaking, the economy went well under him. Unemployment's low and falling. There's very healthy economic growth. The stock market is booming. Taxes are not too high. The price of some essentials rose sharply, though. So the Biden administration's financial aid to needy Americans didn't win a lot of gratitude, which it should have done. And the infrastructure program was another boost economically, but again, he didn't receive the credit that deserved. Biden executed Trump's plan to withdraw from Afghanistan in August 2021, and a high majority of Americans approved of that policy. But the chaotic and undignified scenes of withdrawal from Kabul airport hurt Biden's standing. Up until then, he'd had net approval, he lost it, and he never ever regained it. Trump seized on the Afghan situation, exploited it shamelessly, despite it being his policy to pull out. So Kabul falling to the Taliban immediately was deeply humiliating for Uncle Sam. Now, Trumpists will blame the Ukraine war on Biden. The Ukraine war began when it did for various reasons. The end of coronavirus was one. It was unwise to assemble hundreds of thousands of troops with a pandemic still on. By 2022, pandemic was over. Putin had a cordial relationship with Trump, who was doing his bidding. Better relationship between any Russian leader and the US president ever, I would say. Even better than the Second World War. So Trump repeatedly took Putin's side against his own intelligence agencies. Trump was always an apologist for Putin's murders. So Putin knew that Trump was highly predictable. How would he react to the invasion of Ukraine? Better not risk it, because he might react badly. Even if Trump didn't react badly, it might queer the pitch for Trump's re-election. So better not risk it until Trump won the re-election, except Trump lost, and therefore there wasn't much to lose by starting that war. Anyways, coronavirus had changed Putin's mindset and made him impatient to conquer Ukraine. So there wasn't much Russian interference in this election, 2024, in the United States. They didn't really need to, and they realized they did too much. It was too blatant. It might actually hurt their man, Trump. Anyway, if you go back to 2018, Putin even said in a press conference he had wanted Trump to win in 2016 when there was large scale Russian hacking at the campaign. Putin openly reviled Hillary Clinton because she stood by democracies regressed by Russia. So in 2024, it was blatant that Russia wanted Trump back because the Biden administration had been fairly good at arming Ukraine. Trump publicly pledged to betray Ukraine. Therefore, the Russian media said they want Kamala Harris to win because they had to counter the blindingly obvious fact that Trump was what Russia wanted, Trump's victory. So Democrats, another thing, are the only major party to run a woman as a presidential candidate, and both lost. So three women have stood to be vice president for a major party. Kamala H is the only one of the three elected. Those who lost are Geraldine Ferraro for the Democrats in 1984 and Sarah Palin for the Republicans in 2008. So methinks the Democrats will not run a female candidate next time for the presidency anyway, maybe the vice presidency. A significant minority of Americans say they're opposed to a woman as president, about 20%. Now, most of those are dyed-in-the-wool Republicans, but can the Democrats afford to alienate the others, some of whom are independents, when these elections are decided by sort of 3 percentage points of the vote? On the other hand, some of those who ceteris paribus would prefer a female over a male. So female candidates can be advantageous. Methinks that those who are anti-male may well out anti-female voters. So Miss Harris's black and Indian ethnicity was supposed to be an advantage. No doubt it appealed to some racists because they're racialists of another kind who react against their ethnicity. I don't think too many, or rather there were none. So the Democratic Party is dominated by racists and sexists, and there are quite a few others in the Republican Party too. So the Democratic Party is sworn to brainwash children into hateful ideologies, and it declares war on male heterosexuality. So their bigotry has been defeated. Kamala Harris's abilities as candidate must be studied. She's a thoroughly evil person like Trump, but she's evil in a different way. She's too liberal, she's a sworn enemy of children, and her bloodlust is deeply off-putting. But Vice President Harris has many qualities. She's intelligent, energetic, and she was highly successful in her professional career before she entered public life. She's presentable, an effective rhetor. So on paper, she seemed a very credible candidate. But she couldn't think of a single thing the United States could have done better under Biden. And she didn't address people's economic concerns. She failed to control illegal immigration, and that was her portfolio. She picked Tim Walz as her running mate. Was he a catastrophic choice? He's on the bland side. Was he too old? Um, he's also driven by violent hatred for children. not the sort of person who should be teaching. He signed a law to deprive badly injured children and very sick children of emergency medical care. What kind of a fiend does that? So this was a turnout election. Very few people didn't have an opinion on Trump. Um, and that's why nothing that happened in the campaign changed minds. So the Republicans were more successful at Operation Turnout than before, despite being outspent by the other side. Now, at 60, Kamala was neither old nor young for that role, but she was 18 years younger than her opponent. And perhaps a much younger running mate would have boosted her, would have neutralized J.D. Vance's youth. Some say Josh Shapiro should be the running mate, although he's not particularly young. He's governor of Pennsylvania, and that is the crucial swing state with its 19 electoral votes. But was Shapiro too Zionist? That's why he wasn't selected. The torch will pass to a new generation in 2028. Who will the Democrats' nominee be 4 years hence? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, what's her name? Gretchen Whitmer, perhaps, Pete Buttigieg. As I say, don't think it will be a woman though. Um, they would all be seen as too minority. Maybe Buttigieg, partly because he's gay, seen as too minority. So the Dems relied very heavily on women. Female voters voted mostly for Kamala, but not by a sufficiently big margin. Not all women hate children. So the Democrats were not as successful as the ethnic minorities as usual. Anyway, what's going to happen? This Republican dominated Congress might pass money for that border wall with Mexico, but it wouldn't be finished within 4 years. Mass deportations of illegal immigrants might occur, but there'll be some heartrending scenes. So I don't think that'll be as popular as Trump's hoping. The Department of Justice says it doesn't investigate sitting presidents. These investigations will be closed until 2028. If he's still alive, they may pass the statute of limitations. Remember, Trump still hasn't been sentenced for his New York case, may get jail or, well, jail. I don't see if that would work. A fine, suspended sentence. He's got other state cases against him. So one in Virginia, one in Georgia. Trump will cut off aid to Ukraine, like I said. But Europe is too parsimonious and short-sighted to arm and fund Ukraine on its own. European NATO plus Canada and so on could afford to do so, but they're too stingy. Crime does not pay, and Trump is going to make Russia's crimes pay. The aggressors will be encouraged by what he's doing. I think Ukraine will never get into NATO. Well, I've long said that. It may not even get into the EU, what Trump's going to do. Anyway, so in the meantime, if before Putin tries to swallow Ukraine whole, he might attack Georgia. Russia might test the resolve of NATO to defend the former Soviet states in the Baltic. Anyway, so what else is going to happen? The Chinese might invade Taiwan. They didn't dare do so under Biden. Xi Jinping might persuade Trump to stand aside and allow China to retake the island. Anyway, there's no telling what Trump will do regarding the cruelest tyrant in the world. He begged that he fell in love with Kim Jong Un. I mean, it's just nauseating. How can people go for this? So the United States could launch a military strike on North Korea or could lift all sanctions. You just can't tell. It depends how skillfully Pyongyang exploits Trump's many psychological vulnerabilities. But the economic plan put forward by Team Trump could spell disaster, like I've outlined. There'll be a tax cut for the super rich, but no spending cuts. The budget deficit will increase alarmingly. He's all economically illiterate. Trump will probably greenlight an Israeli attack on Iranian nuclear facilities. This would wreck the Iranian economy, severely retard the Iranian nuclear program, if there is one. It would also be illegal, and it would allow Russia the excuses for their own unlawful attacks, maybe attacks on Ukrainian nuclear power stations. So Iran will lick its wound and exact vengeance at some unspecified point in the future, but I don't see how they can riposte on an equal scale with Israel. They just don't have the capability. Hamas is annihilated, Hezbollah is sort of fatally enfeebled. It's hard to see Iran exercising much sway in the Levant for years to come. So the United States under Trump is likely to avoid foreign wars. He'll give carte blanche to his allies. Saudi Arabia will intensify its campaign to slaughter Shia civilians in Yemen. So with Trump, there are no legal or ethical considerations. He cares about himself only. So the United States will continue to pollute apace. Climate change will be accelerated. Other countries will ask why they should make sacrifices to save the planet when the largest economy in the world does not. Is going to be an ecological cataclysm. So Trump will go within 4 years, no longer be president, but Trumpism will not go away. Will Vice President Vance be elected president? Probably. But who would be his running mate? Quite possibly Ivanka, the most telegenic of Donald's 5 children, keep the Trump cult going. a female, they might see that as advantageous, someone who's just the right age, and all the rest of it. Other contenders might be Tim Scott, Josh Hawley. So the Trumpist formula of ultra aggression, vulgarity, anti intellectualism, sadism, isolationism, Islamophobia, and hysteria may yet succeed. They think they found the magic formula for winning elections permanently. But the cult of personality around Trump, well, it's questionable whether an individual will be able to galvanize people so much. He succeeded in persuading people to vote who don't usually bother to come out and do so. The Grand Old Party managed to get its voters out early, as I say, and they usually don't. Um, so the Democrats could well come back, but there's no inevitability about it. They've got to earn it. They've got to learn these painful lessons and not just lacerate Trump, much though he deserve it. So the Democrats have got to face up to some home truths. Most Americans want drastic action on illegal immigration, and they care deeply about the economy. They do not care about so-called intersectionality and transgenderism. They do not want whites to be taught to hate themselves. Right. Thank you for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon. Donate to PayPal, George Callahan, 79 at gmail.com. Goodbye.